Yusuf wanted us to look at XORO. Now, we know the share went ex-diff and there was a beautiful, or ugly rather, double top that was confirmed on XORO when that support that waited at 165 Rand and 7 cents changed into a resistance. But take note here, Yusuf, as soon as the share price came close to that 40-week moving average, waiting at 147 Rand 92, you could see there was buyers protecting the share price and it lifted to higher levels. That is seen as positive. My stochastic is still pointing downwards, which implies that we can see more downside and that the overall momentum to the top, or to the bottom is still in place. The critical level is my 40-week moving average, 147.92, that needs to remain in place. Above that support level of 165.07, can I assume again that the momentum to the top can continue? Previously, if I look back, there was an inverse head and shoulder formation on XORO that almost reached its full target. So we can maybe see a temporary pullback and then another reach to the top, especially if those resistances change into a support in order to sustain and eventually take this full target to the level where it should go. Fumani wanted us to look at Brait. Fumani, I know if you've got the share already, you'll agree with me that the frustration on Brait is the thin volume. And I want to have a look here, but because we can see there was quite some volume back in Feb 2020 up until June, and then it was the desert times again. But on the week of the 8th of March, there was a spike in volume. So in technical analysis, when there is a spike in volume and the share price after that starts to rise, we assume that the sellers have dried up and that there are only buyers left, and that is a good indication. However, I can't really say that about Brait because it rather seems that the share only consolidated sideways. There's not really higher lows and higher new recent highs that is visible. So at the moment, the strong resistance on Brait that needs to change into a support is 2 Rand 97. The second one is my 40-week moving average, waiting at 3 Rand 19. If we look back on Brait, we can see since that week of the 12th of October 2020 until the 11th of Jan 21, the share struggled to change that 40-week moving average, but just could not manage to do that. Yes, my stochastic looks optimistic. It's coming back from oversold levels. My lines are pointing upwards. It is already sitting on a 37, but I want to draw your attention more importantly on this possible head and shoulder formation. And I'm saying possible because a head and shoulder only gets confirmed once the neckline changes into a resistance. And if I look at this left shoulder, head, and possible right shoulder, the neckline of this formation is waiting at 2 Rand 37. When 2 Rand 37 changes into a resistance, the warning of this head and shoulder formation will be on the table, which means that my share price can at least go. The conservative target of my head and shoulder is the length of, I'm using the right shoulder in this case, projected downwards from the neckline, which means I can go back to 1 Rand 84. Only if the share price starts to consolidate above my right shoulder, 292, or above my left shoulder, 366, can I take a sigh of relief and say, hey, for now my head and shoulder formation is off the table. Things might look a little bit to the upside. So keep those resistance levels in place and have a look at that neckline to make sure that head and shoulder formation does not come into play and play out. And sometimes you get false breaks. Maybe I must just add that in. Sometimes it tests the neckline, change it into resistance just to bounce from it again. That's where position size is critical when trading in overall. Kevin wanted us to look at Astral Foods. And I want to actually have a look at a line graph here, Kevin, because then we can see what a beautiful cup and handle formation is waiting here. And my cup started here back in July 2020 already. Cup, strong support there at 115.20, found resistance there at 143.70, pulled back, found support at a higher level than the previous one, and that's where my handle came into play. So my neckline of this cup and handle is waiting at 143.70. and only above that level will the formation become a reality, and I can say it is in play. What is the second positive thing for me about this graph is the fact that the share rose, pulled back, but kept my 40-week moving average a support. And that my 40-week moving average is the red line, and that is waiting at 135 Rand 90. That tells me there was enough buyers to protect this share, to keep that 40-week moving average a support, and that is seen as positive. After the neckline, the strong resistance on Astral Foods that needs to change into a support is waiting at 154 Rand 50. What is the full target of my cup and handle? It is the length of the cup projected upwards from the neckline where my formation will be confirmed, which means Astral Foods can possibly go to 170 Rand 35 should the full formation play out. First warning will be below the 40-week moving average, and when the share starts to consolidate below the handle, and that is waiting at 123.24, will the optimism around this formation be off the table, and can I assume that we can see lower levels? My stochastic is pointing downwards, sitting here in mid-zone at a 50. It's not overbought or oversold enough, but my price action on my graph weighs the heaviest and tells me that there is keen buyers to protect the share price. If I go back on the history of Astral Foods, I can see previously, back in July 2020, the share price traded around these levels. And if I go back all the way, the last time the share traded around 138.86 was in July 2017. Went all the way up to 321 Rand and plummeted ever since. So my 40-week moving average is a critical level. I like that cup and handle formation. Let's assume, Kevin, that the buyers will continue to protect the share price and that full target of my cup and handle formation can play out. Rashad wanted us to look at PayPal, a share listed on the NASDAQ in the US. Now I want to go back to a candle graph because we can see here, Rashad, that there is a ugly inverse cup and handle formation where I've got a massive cup and then a handle. And the handle was confirmed when that $278.06 started to change into a resistance. More importantly, have a look at my red line. It is almost waiting exactly at the neckline of my inverse cup and handle. And that tells me what the importance and how important that support is. And that is waiting at $226.62. Once that level changes into a resistance, all the bells and whistles on PayPal will go off as a warning for the inverse cup and handle, but also for your long-term sentiment that will suddenly change into a negative territory. My stochastic is sitting on a 40. Both lines have turned around, which tells me that the momentum can take this share even lower. What is the full target of the inverse cup and handle? It's the length of the cup projected downwards from the neckline where the formation will be confirmed, which means PayPal can go back to $142.23 should the full formation play out. My 40-week moving average is a critical level because if we go back, we can see in the past, in April 2018, how important this moving average was to sustain the momentum to the top, but also warn when something was out of place. And I mean, back in April 2020, when that share price changed that 40-week moving average into a support, I mean, it just skyrocketed to a brand new record high there of $309.14. Keep an eye on this inverse cup and handle, Rashad, only when that resistance of $277.86 starts to change into a support again, can I take a sigh of relief and say, hey, the warning of the inverse cup and handle is for now off the table. Sheree wanted us to look at a VENG, a thin share, which makes it so difficult to trade, Sheree. So at the moment, we can see, and again, like in Braid's case, the volume on the share is so thin, which makes it very, very difficult. We can see that there was a spike in volume since the week of the 25th of January, which means if my share price continued to rise after this spike in volume, I would have said this is positive indication that there's more buyers than sellers. But I can see that 4 cents were a strong resistance. There was not enough buyers to take it through 4 cents, and now it's pulling back. My 40-week moving average is the critical level, and that is waiting at 2 cents. Below that level, the long-term sentiment towards Aveng will change to negative, and we can then assume to see lower levels. Strong resistance to change into a support is 4 cents for Aveng. Above that, we can see higher lows, and that will be seen as optimistic. It's sometimes dangerous to use a stochastic on such a thin share because it moves so quickly because of the thin volume. So almost with this stochastic at 100, I would almost say it is overbought, but I would ignore it for now. The volume and the price action carries a lot more weight for me on the Aveng graph than the stochastic indicator. Kevin wanted us to look at PPC, one of our market's favorites recently, and we can see, Kevin, that if maybe more visible on a line graph, that the share pulled back, found strong support at R2.99 and bounced again. And without being oversold, it's done that in overbought levels, and that is very optimistic. So if PPC can change R3.30 into a support and keep it one, the next higher low will be confirmed that can take the share a lot higher. If a share, this inverse head and shoulder that we've spoken about previously, that target has been reached. So what we can do to identify next strong support and resistance levels, other than using the past history, we can use Fibonacci levels to say, where is my next strong resistance if I take my recent low, which is around R1.59 back in Feb this year, and I take my recent high at R3.30, which was reached in the week of the 19th of April. My next strong resistance on PPC is waiting at R4.35. Below that support of R2.99, my share will warn again. Below T264, my next support is waiting. But R4.35 seems to be a reasonable Fibonacci target that I can aim for, assuming that resistance there at R3.30 changes into a support. The share has beautifully changed the 40-week moving average into a support, and that is seen as very optimistic. Don't forget to send through your requests for next week's show. Have a fantastic week. Take care.